Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is Year Zero. Today, I have Dave DeCamp on the show. I invited Dave on to talk about the American response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how it seems that what America is trying to accomplish is a proxy war to break Russia, similar to Afghanistan. We get into the results of all the sanctions and everything else, and how it seems to be hurting U.S. citizens as much as it's hurting the Russian population. So I think you'll really enjoy this podcast. RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a great libertarian and a great anarcho-capitalist. He's also a great graphic designer. He designed my podcast logo. And if you're looking for more of his services, go to AutonomyVirtual.com. That's AutonomyVirtual.com, where he offers professional remote services. Reading directly from his website, it says he does everything from data entry to back-end administration and software consultation to graphic design, book editing, and more. To jumpstart your project with his combined, it's not just Ryan there, their combined 30 plus years of experience. It saves you time, money, and lets you focus on what's most important, your own journey to autonomy. So, if you're tired of hearing about RyanBunting.com, which I don't see how you can be, it's such a brilliant ad spot, go to Autonomy Virtual. LibertarianInstitute.org is where you can find this podcast, as if you didn't already know that. Patrick McFarland's Liberty Weekly, Keith Knight's Don't Tread on Anyone, Kyle Anzalone's Conflict of Interest, and the Scott Horton Show, as well as a bunch of other, a bunch of great writers like Jim Bovard and Lori Calhoun, and I'm blanking on names right now, and I apologize. Connor Freeman's over there, does some great work. So go over to libertarianinstitute.org and check out everything over there. And while you're over there, donate. Help us keep the lights on, man. We're trying to continue doing this work for you. So go to libertarianinstitute.org/donate and throw us a couple of bucks, man. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. All right. I'm here with one of my favorite writers from antiwar.com, Dave DeCamp. So what's going on, man? How are you?
Not much, Tommy. Thanks for having me on.
Now you're actually editing at Antiwar now, right?
Yeah, well, it's my full-time job now. I'm the news editor for antiwar.com.
Nice.
And kind of what I focus on is just writing kind of the short news articles. Jason Ditz is there too.
Jason's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, and Kyle and Will too from the Libertarian Institute. They've been writing new shit. They've been writing news stories too over there. So we've had like a huge section of news, and there's so much shit going on that it's been really good. So I mean, I focus on writing and editing the news stories and stuff, which is, it's a lot of work, kind of sifting through all the news, the articles each day. But I started doing it full time. I guess it's been like a year and a half.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
I can't even keep up with what I'm doing day to day. So it's nothing personal.
Yeah.
So, well, this, I've talked a lot. I've had Scott on. I'm sure you've seen that, and then I had Dan McAdams on, and we've talked a lot about like the background of Russia, Ukraine. I haven't really gotten into what's going on right now, and the more I see how the U.S. is reacting, and I think there was a Washington Post article that came out not that long ago that basically just it's putting out the information that the U.S. is utilizing Ukraine as a proxy war to drain Russia. And I was like, man, like the way they're reacting, the way that things are going, this is looking very much like Afghanistan, Russia.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really bad, this whole situation. You mentioned that Washington Post article that, was basically summing up what their sources, that which were like European diplomats, NATO officials. The summary of it was that for some, NATO members, it's better for Ukrainians to keep fighting and dying than bring about a peace that comes too early or at too high a cost, I think they said, for Europe.
Yeah,
which basically means Ukraine kind of making any concessions to Russia. They don't want them to give up even Crimea, which has been under Russian control since 2014. They're never getting Crimea back. And even that, they don't want Ukraine to commit to. And I mean, I think the most revealing thing is that Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, he hasn't spoken with Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, since February 15th. That's over a week before Russia invaded. That's over 2 months now. And, they act like they care about Ukrainians, but if they did, they would be trying everything they could. And diplomacy would be a major part of that, you would think.
Yeah.
And just look at all the weapons that the Biden administration, since Russia invaded on February 24th, they've announced $2.6 billion in new aid for Ukraine. And it's, that's so much money. And there's a report that I just saw. I have to reread it because it says that they're about to announce another $800 million one. So that brings it up to $3.4 billion. We're getting close to Israel numbers here. And, they get that in 1 year. This is like 2 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another article in the Washington Post that I wrote about the other day that the U.S., NATO, EU, they're preparing for long term. They said they're preparing for a new world where they no longer try to cooperate or coexist with Russia. And now it's all about isolation and hurting Russia. So we've they've been pretty aggressive towards Russia over the past decade, but we've really entered a new era here that I don't think there's any turning back from, kind of no matter what happens on the ground in Ukraine. It seems like this is what, especially the Biden administration, what the U.S. wanted, and what a lot of hawks in Europe wanted too, which is just tough for me to wrap my head around. The countries that are close there, why they would want any of this. But yeah, it's we use the term the new Cold War with Russia. We've used that for a while now, but now it's official. This is it. This is the new era, and it's it's a dangerous one.
Whenever they talk about isolation, I think about the way that they treat North Korea or Iran, and it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around Russia being treated in that same manner.
Yeah. I couldn't believe that they're when Russia invaded, I was really surprised that this really kind of went down. Because you said, I couldn't imagine them trying to close Russia off like that, like in North Korea or in Iran, but it seems like that's what they're doing. And they're really trying to get, and what's really another telling thing is that the EU is making some real plans to ban Russian oil and gas, which, how reliant they are on that, it's going to really hurt them.
That's going to be devastating. Yes.
Yeah. Especially Germany. I mean, they're saying Germany's going to, have a serious recession because of it. They're going to phase it out over a few years is their plan. But, if Russia finds buyers, they could just cut them off in a couple, sooner than that. And that'll really throw Europe into a recession. So yeah, the fact that they're actually going ahead with that, it's just not a good sign. And now you have Finland and Sweden talking about joining NATO, which is just going to make.
Well, on top of everything, that's insane. I want to get to that actually, but I want to ask you about this cutting off the the energy supplies, it seems like Russia was far more prepared for the financial warfare than anybody thought they would be. And the ruble seems to be doing okay. It did have some issues there in the first couple of weeks, but it seems to have bounced back. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's back up to the level it was at, right before the invasion. Yeah, they've definitely, they've been preparing for this, I think, since 2014, since Crimea, when they were sanctioned, by the US and Europe. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely taken a serious toll on Russia's economy. I mean, Putin said yesterday that, they're recovering and everything, but, other Russian officials, including the prime minister, Kremlin spokesman, they've said, this is, kind of the hardest thing Russia's gone through since the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the ruble's, doing good, and, they are gonna recover from this. And, it's not hurting Putin at all. Like you see the stuff that the U.S., the reason why they're doing these sanctions, they say is to hurt Putin and his inner circle, but it's really just hurting Russians. I mean, Putin's approval rating went up to 83% in March. I think, what is Biden's, like in the 30s, I think.
It's not good.
Yeah.
I think he barely beats out the mainstream media right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I saw one article about Biden's approval rating, and it added in, it was like MSNBC or something, very pro-Biden outlet. It just like added that, well, Putin's approval rating in the U.S. is at an all-time low. It's like, well, that doesn't matter at all. What his approval rating in the U.S. Like,
yeah, we're not voting for Putin.
Yeah. Exactly.
No matter how much you want us to believe that anytime we vote for anybody other than a Democrat, it is a vote for Putin.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just, it seems like, I don't know what exactly is going on here, because it's hard to believe that it's just, incompetence, or that they're just really like trying to just hurt Russia as much as they can, and even at the expense of hurting Americans they don't seem to care about.
Well, was it last week or the week before last, even Biden came out and said, like, yeah, these sanctions aren't just on Russians, they're on Americans too.
Yeah. He's been saying that.
Yeah.
And
it's like,
we're just supposed to.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Especially after the lockdowns and all that, and with inflation and gas prices, like how people can go along with this, which it seems like, I mean, it's tough. I don't know. When it comes to the polls that are coming out, it's tough to, get a good sense of exactly what Americans are thinking. But there's been poll after poll kind of showing that Americans want Biden to be tougher on Russia, which is just hard for me to believe,
Yeah, I've seen that. Like, I've seen these Fox News polls where they say that, like, the sanctions aren't good enough or whatever. It's like, what do you want to do? Like, you really want to put boots on the ground in Ukraine is what you're advocating for, and that's insanity. And did you happen to see that? I think I think the way you pronounce the guy's name is Jacques Beau article. It's an essay that he wrote in French that was translated into English. Kim Iverson covered it earlier today on The Hill on Rising. Did you see that?
Is he a Swiss intelligence guy?
Yeah. He's been working with NATO and everything.
Yeah, I've been meaning to read that, but I haven't.
Okay, well, she was saying that the reason, like from his speculation or from his breakdown of what's going on in Ukraine, that the way that the U.S. knew that there was going to be an invasion of Ukraine from Russia was because Zelensky was increasing the bombardment on Crimea and Donbass. And that once Zelensky started militarizing at the border of Crimea and sending the military into Donbass, and just relentlessly, that they left Russia no choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Like in the lead up to it, they were saying that Ukraine was building up in the Donbass, and shelling definitely went up. Sometimes it's hard to tell which side is doing the shelling based on the reports from the OSCE there that they monitor. They used to monitor the ceasefire. They're not there anymore. But yeah, shelling definitely really went up.
What made me think about that is because you brought up February 15th of the last day that Biden was in communications with Russian military, and so apparently the bombardment happened on the 16th, and
yeah,
so,
that sounds about right from what I remember. In that last week there, it was just about that when it really started.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at it, Russia framed it right before we went in. Putin recognized the independence of the Donbass republics, and the whole thing is framed around liberating it. And now, I mean, if you look at a map, the assault is totally focused on the east. And so when it comes to taking territory, that's the territory that they're focused on. And the narrative is kind of that they wanted to invade Kiev, but they were driven back. But
all that today, Apple News, the Russia's failed invasion of Kiev, and I'm like, I'm not really sure that's exactly what was happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's all over. That's the narrative. But the reason why I don't think that that's true is just the fact that they never unleashed the full power of their air force. They could bomb the hell out of that country and level Kiev just with airstrikes and missile strikes from inside Russia. They definitely took a lot of losses. I saw there's a lot of burnt out Russian tanks, and by their own numbers, they lost over 1,000, I think over 1,300 troops so far, which is a significant amount. Because you think about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, 7,000 U.S. troops died in all throughout the 20 years there. So yeah, they're definitely taking some losses, but people have to look at this realistically. And what's at this point, it's what's going to happen? Because you have Zelensky and the Ukrainians. They've been in these talks with Russia, but now they're saying, if they take Mariupol, the city that's in the southeast there, the talks are over. And it's they're about to take Mariupol. There's only one little holdout of Ukrainian troops there. So they're acting like they have leverage, the Ukrainians, but they don't. I mean, Russia's just going to slowly take over the Donbass. They're saying that they could fight to the end. And Biden and Blinken are saying that they can win. So yeah, it seems like this is really going to keep dragging. Wow.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think the only reason, and I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of a Russian apologist or something, but it seems like the only reason that it's taking as long is because it really feels like Russia has been kind of reserved in the way that they've been going at this. It feels like they're holding back, and maybe I overcalculate their capabilities. Maybe that's what it is, but it seems like because I remember, what was it, a couple of years ago, there was this conversation, and Putin had said that if I wanted to take Ukraine, it would take 2 weeks.
Yeah, he has said that.
And I don't think that I don't think it's bluster. I think if he would have unleashed the force of the Russian military on Ukraine, that he could have taken Kiev, and there would be no Zelensky to complain about it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there was a source in the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's intelligence agency, that told Newsweek, this was back in March, but that's what this guy was saying, was that he is holding back. Putin, this is a guy, the Pentagon, saying that it could be much worse. And it was written by Will Arkin, and the way he kind of demonstrated how limited it was. In the first, I think, 24 days of the Russian invasion, they dropped less bombs than the U.S. did in the first day of the invasion of Iraq, which is, that tells you something, because the invasion of Iraq was a regime change. that was the goal. That doesn't seem like that was the goal in Ukraine. And, it's not, there's definitely been, if you bomb cities, you're going to kill civilians. Ukrainian civilians are being killed, a lot of them. But they're not intentionally bombing civilian targets. It's just, that's not happening. There's the alleged massacre in Bucha, but that's not clear if they were just killed in the fighting. Some of these civilians, if they're all, or if, some of them might have been executed, but it doesn't look like it was like a mass execution of civilians, and that wouldn't mean that Putin ordered it, even if it happened, because these things happen in war. People go crazy, and it's horrible. That's why we should do everything we can to avoid it. Instead, and that's another thing. I mean, I think this was the same source in Newsweek last week, talking to Will Arkin again, Defense Intelligence Agency, saying that they're not intentionally targeting civilians, to claim that it's a genocide, which Biden said it was a genocide. Just saying that is, a nonsense claim. Because then what's the standard there? He's basically saying, civilians killed in a war, that's genocide. So then how many genocides has the U.S. committed this century? This road that they're trying to go down here. The U.S. calls it, when they do it, it's collateral damage, and it's genocide when Russia does it. But yeah, I mean, again, it's still horrific and everything, but it's just, the narrative is just so, it's just like tiring to.
Well, that was part of Russia's complaint about the Donbass and the civil war that had been going on in Ukraine since 2014, was that there was a genocide happening against Russian-speaking Ukrainians in the Donbass region. So, one of the things I've been doing, and I'm not as up on it as I was like a week ago, but I was paying attention to a lot of what Alexander Dugin was writing.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of people give him a lot of credit for being in Putin's ear and having this influence on Putin. So I was like, well, let me see what the Russian perspective is. Like, what are they saying? And, Alexander Dugin was basically just co-signing on what, Russian military officials were saying, and saying, hey, we're not starting a war here. We're finishing a war. We're ending the war. And a lot of people want to separate what's happening today from what occurred in 2014. And they're looking at this as a continuation. And if they're viewing this as a continuation, and then they see the actions that have taken since 2014 by the U.S., by the Ukrainians, by the West, by NATO, then they're looking that the war was escalated by others. No matter how you want to think about it, that you part of when you step into a situation where you're fighting someone, you have to understand the way that they view the world. You have to understand the way they view the fight, the way that they view engagement. And we're unwilling to, at least at the citizen level, understand that. And I think this goes into, I don't remember who it was that said the other day, was it the CIA that said, well, this is an information war. Well, and it seems like the information war is against the American people, not against Russia.
Yeah, I mean, that's also part of the narrative, is that Putin's so reckless. He's this madman, and there's no he's not rational. So that plays into the whole, not negotiating with them thing, and people don't try to understand the motives of a madman. And they do want to forget. This happens with every war in the media.
Don't say that. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah.
No.
But I mean,
there were weapons of mass destruction. He's lying to y'all,
But I mean, like the context that they leave out. I mean, you always see this, just from following the news the way that I do. For like one example, everything about Iran and Israel, that relationship, there's always some major context being left out, like the fact that Israel has a secret nuclear weapons program.
Yeah, I mean, well, Palestine. And anytime you hear about Palestine and Israel, like there's so much that's not being said. It's just like these quirky people that are terrorists started bombing Israel from a school, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't start with the bombing. It actually started with them throwing rocks. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great example because I just think of me personally. I didn't even know what Palestine was until I was like in my 20s. Like I was just never told about it. They don't teach you at school about, you just think Israel was like always there.
Yeah.
But so with this war, the thing that they're not telling you and the thing that they're trying to lie about is the U.S. involvement in the coup in 2014. They don't want to call it the media outlets think it's like a conspiracy. They call it a conspiracy theory. The idea that the U.S. was behind the coup, which sparked the civil war, which led to Russia taking Crimea, and started all this NATO cooperation with Ukraine, and is what ultimately led to the situation we are in now. So like for just a typical ordinary American, like the thing you were saying about Dugan, they probably don't even know that there was a war in the Donbass still going on, that the war never ended. And that's totally part of the information war, taking out the context. And there was a report in NBC News. It was, quoting, unnamed U.S. officials who said that the U.S. has been putting out information based on low confidence intelligence, basically putting out information that they don't know is true to the media, telling it to them as fact, as part of an information war against Russia. But yeah, that's more of an information war against us because Putin knows what's going on in Russia. Like one of the examples was there's this article, story, went everywhere that Putin's inner circle was lying to him about the war in Ukraine. And they said that was based on based on no evidence. It was like an analysis, they said. But they told these media outlets this as a fact, and it went everywhere.
Yeah.
If Putin sees that, he's not going to think, oh, they're lying to me. The U.S. knows. So it just gives us Americans a false idea of what's happening. They did it with a few things. The chemical weapons claim that the U.S. was trying to distract from the biolabs thing. They kept saying Russia was going to use chemical weapons. Turned out that was based on no evidence. It's a claim that that Russia asked China for military aid. That was based on nothing. And that's kind of a strange one. It's like, why put that out in the media? I didn't see the point of that. Their logic was, it's to warn China not to arm Russia. But can't you just tell them that?
Bullshit. It's to get the China hawks on board.
Exactly. Yeah. It's to kind of portray this narrative that Russia and China are like our enemy.
It seems to me
they're working together.
It seems to me that the lies, this information campaign is all about winning public opinion in order to go to war with Russia.
Yeah.
That's how it feels.
That's what it's a serious psyop that we're living right now. It's everywhere. I don't see it because I'm out in the country, but my friends back in New York, there's always Ukraine signs and flags and protests for no flies, like what they call anti-war protests, but they're protests for World War III for a no-fly zone. This stuff's happening all over. In Times Square, there's all these. I forget there's like this big billboard about Ukraine. It's just everywhere. We're just getting bombarded with it. And you had the guy, what's his name? I forget his name. From
Malcolm Nance.
Malcolm Nance, yeah. Did you see what he's up to?
Yeah, he said he was. Yeah, that old CIA agent and naval intelligence went and joined the Legion.
Yeah, it's just like what, and he was on MSNBC
Dude,
saying,
you can
"Yeah,
barely
I'm
complete
tired
a
of doing
sentence, let alone fight an army. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, he's in his 60s. It's just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
And I wonder if we're gonna start seeing more of that, like, because you think of the way that they use celebrities with the COVID stuff, like, maybe we'll see celebrities going to join the fight, but not really.
You tweeted something about Sean Penn earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. He's been, it's just, man. And what's his name? Zelensky didn't let him speak at the Oscars, but he addressed the Grammys.
Oh, yeah.
It's just everywhere. It's really something.
Yeah, I mean,
and
Patrick McFarland's 3-year-old walked up to him with Legos in the color of the Ukrainian flag the other day.
Really?
They've infiltrated the Libertarian Institute and our families.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, he tweeted that out. He said, "I think my 3-year-old's trolling me."
That's funny. Yeah, so all the Ukrainian flag profile pictures, it's all people that have ignored all the other wars and stuff. So it's frustrating. But yeah, no, it's getting scary. I mean, you had Chris Coons, the senator from Delaware, the other day, basically say that the U.S. should send troops or, talk about it. He wants the Biden administration and Congress to talk about it, sending troops to Ukraine to fight Russia. And he's pretty influential. He's not Coons is not Tom Cotton. Him saying that is pretty scary. And I think he has a lot of influence with Biden.
Mm. Well, Tim Pool reported yesterday that Zelensky and the Pope warned about nuclear war. What's going on? Is there more stuff happening that maybe we don't know about, or is Zelensky still just trying to get assistance?
Yeah, I think it's still part of his whole PR campaign. Yeah, he said in a few interviews, I think that the world should be worried about Russia using nukes. I don't know what the Pope said. I know he's been saying a lot about it. I don't know if his warning was just a general warning of nuclear war, because that is where we're at right now. I mean, more people need to understand that if the U.S. does enter the war directly, then there's a pretty good chance of nuclear war happening. And it seems like these days, a lot of people don't have that kind of in their mind. It's not in the back of people's minds anymore.
Yeah, well, it's not the 70s anymore. We're not taught to hide under desks and all that.
Yeah.
They would rather teach us that we're not the gender we are than to teach us to survive a nuclear holocaust.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, it's just odd whenever I because I'll tune out for a couple of days just because it gets overwhelming, and it's I can't tell what's real, what's not, who's talking shit, who's not, and so I'll tune out, and then I'll flip on something, and I'll be like, what are they talking? Nuclear war? Wait, what has happened in the last couple of days that makes this a reality? And yeah, it's possible if there's a sign that the U.S. is going to get involved, that there could be, nuclear weapons used. And I think people have the view of Hiroshima or Nagasaki when they think of nuclear strikes, but there are a lot of different tactical nukes. There's a lot of different things that they could be using. And I think it's more of a threat to Europe than it is to the United States. And I think this is where NATO is miscalculating.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're the ones that all the European countries, they're the ones that are really going to have to deal with all the fallout from this. And, when it comes to the tactical nukes, that's something people have been saying, Putin could use, but I don't think, there's no reason to think that he would just launch a nuke in Ukraine.
No, I think there would have to definitely be some intelligence for there would have to be some intelligence saying that there's NATO involvement.
Yeah.
Like the flagship that sunk the other day. If it turned out that that was like a NATO attack on that flagship, you know, like because I've heard rumors that Poland sunk that ship. So if that turned out to be the case, like that could be really bad.
Yeah.
So
It could be. And there's British troops in Ukraine right now. That was just revealed over the weekend. There's a report in the Times, the British paper, that British SAS, special forces are in Kiev training Ukrainians how to use the anti-tank weapons they give them. They arrived there about 2 weeks ago. So there's NATO troops on the ground. I mean, they're there for training, but like, what would happen if Russia just took them out?
yeah,
But
what is well, and also how does Russia like view NATO involvement? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, that's the question, and nobody knows, and they keep pushing it because pouring weapons. At what point are you a co-belligerent in the war? If you're pouring weapons into the country, I mean, billions in weapons. They're sharing intelligence. The U.S. is giving them intelligence to use in attacks against Russia. They're training. The U.S. is training them in Eastern Europe in different countries. Now you have the British in there. Like, at what point would Russia consider it NATO? Like, entering the war, and at what point is Russia going to want to send a message to say, step back?
Right.
And what would that message look like?
Right. Yeah.
I could see something like they've said that they'll target like weapon shipments entering Ukraine. I don't know if they have the best line on them, because I feel like that, like, as it entered, from Poland into Ukraine over the border, if they just like took it out, I think that would probably send a pretty big message to NATO. But they're saying that they're bombing all these weapons depots where all these foreign made weapons are. So there's a chance that we're just shipping billions of dollars of equipment and it's just getting blown up by Russia.
Yeah, because then they just, I think it was the second story I heard the other day was they bombed, is it Lviv? And a weapons depot in Lviv. And yeah. And
I think that was yesterday.
And it's like something like 10 or 20 miles from the Polish border where they're bringing in weapons and then, shipping them in. And it was hit the other day. And I think that was the second time in the last couple of weeks I've heard about that.
Yeah, there's been a few times where, because I check Russian media, and just like the statements that they're putting out, and the Russian Defense Ministry, they're always saying that they're hitting these. That's like what, according to Russia, what they've been doing this whole time is just taking out Ukraine's military assets, tanks and helicopters and weapons depots and stuff. And, that makes sense if their plan is to take the Donbass, is to just kind of just take out as much of Ukraine's military as you can before really launching that major offensive. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I am curious to know, like, if how much of this equipment that is just being blown up once it gets into Ukraine. I don't know.
Right. Well, I mean, as long as the Taliban doesn't get it, it's okay, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Just the Nazis can have it.
Yeah, the Nazis can have it. The Taliban can't. So, well, there's also that angle, right? So I think it was I want to say in 2018. You may not even be on this trail, so if you don't know, you don't know. It's fine. But I want to say that I read something in 2018 or 2019 that the Azov battalion was actually in communication with Atomwaffen, and then I'm wondering, like, the U.S. is always talking about this domestic white supremacist, terror threat. Like, well, if Atomwaffen went and joined this like international legion in Ukraine, when they come back, they're basically Al Qaeda.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know if you know anything about like actual facts on that, because I can't find any reporting on if that actually happened. But I have heard people like suggest that Atomwaffen is going into Ukraine, and they were some of the first volunteers to join that international legion.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that there's been reports on that. I don't know about that group specifically, but I know in like BuzzFeed and stuff. I don't really can't think of the details off the top of my head, but they're saying like, you know, far right, whatever they call consider far right groups in the U.S. go into Ukraine to fight with Azov, and this happened
Anyone
like
right of Lenin, I think.
yeah, yeah, and they and like for you know when the war first started in 2014. I mean, I think there's a lot of reporting on that. I know Whitney Webb, you know, she wrote an article recently,
I know the
kind
name. Remind me who she is. I know that.
of. She's written a lot on Epstein.
Is she the Miami Herald lady?
No.
No.
What does she do? She has her own thing now. I think
okay.
It's called Unlimited Hangout. But she wrote an article kind of speculating about that, like, you know, all these warnings about this domestic terrorism, and she ties it to. I'll send you it. I'll look for it and send it to you when we're done. And she ties it to all these warnings about domestic terrorism, and she mentions those reports of these far right groups going and joining Azov, and kind of her, you know, thesis is that Azov, these far right, you know, Nazis in Ukraine are going to be, you know, the next Al Qaeda and the target of the next terror war. Like we're kind of creating them, and it's going to be a similar result from like, you know, arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, which they never, you know, you've seen Hillary Clinton, Max Boot, people like that talk about us using Afghanistan as an example, the Soviet Union and Afghanistan as an example of what to do in Ukraine, but they never like finish the story.
Yeah, what did she say? There were some consequences, but you know,
yeah.
It's kind of like a Madeleine Albright, you know, we think the price is worth it type deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way it comes across. Yeah, so a bunch of innocent civilians died. We stopped the actual powerhouse, you know.
Yeah, it's like we got our wars too.
All right. But everybody's still worried about the Coca-Cola vigilante that's going to stop Pepsi in its tracks or whatever. I don't know. But it is crazy though, to see the way that this stuff is unfolding. You had brought up China and Russia's relationship earlier, so I want to touch on that for a second before we get on Finland and Sweden, because I think that's probably one of the biggest threats to actual a nuclear attack is Finland and Sweden, if you ask me. But there was China and Russia did release kind of this treaty, this joint statement in, I want to say it was in January, where they were talking about their relationship, and how there are no limits on their relationship, and they were, you know, considering each other allies. And China's been one of the least vocal countries when it comes to the war in Ukraine. They've kind of like, you know, you think scolding them and is going to do anything. That's not the way to go about it. I know when Visa and MasterCard went after, like pulled their services from Russia, China was like, well, you can use our credit systems, you know, type deal. So do you think there is anything there to that alliance that, because it seems, again, reading Dugan, like what I'm getting out of this is people are tired of of American hegemony. They're kind of sick of America being the bully of the world, and I think China's right along there with them. And so it wouldn't shock me, because one of the things Dugan said, he wrote this article right at the beginning of the invasion. It was either right before or right after the invasion into Ukraine. It was called "A War in Ukraine is Good for Russia." One of the things he lays out in this article, if you've not read it, I'll send it to you. It's actually fairly
I should read him. That's something I should check out.
I'm on his Telegram. That dude writes more than anybody I know. I swear I get like 80 notifications.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, it's insane. Some of it's in languages I don't speak. So, like, but in this article, it was like war with Ukraine is good for Russia. In the article, he wrote that this is economic war, and that the warfare is meant to cripple the United States economy. And so it seemed to me like when Biden came out and was like, yeah, the sanctions are on American citizens just as much as they are on Russia. It was like an acknowledgement that, oh shit, what we did actually strengthened the Russian government, the Russian economy, as opposed to weakening it. And that's what Dugin was saying, that getting the Western influence out of the country would have negative results immediately, but it would allow Russia to take the steps to become an economic superpower. And I'm wondering if between the Chinese growing their economy and now Russia showing that all these sanctions and the way this is playing out is not really damaging their economy much, if this is the key, as Dugin put it, to a multipolar world and to end the unipolar American hegemony.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're definitely seeing that play out with Russia and China. And, this is the obvious result of the U.S. policy towards China, towards Russia, over the past decade, and towards China over the past, pretty much since Trump, when they started really kind of putting the pressure on China. I mean, it started under Obama with the military stuff in the South China Sea, but the U.S. didn't really start sanctioning China until Trump. And there's still not like major economic sanctions, nothing close to what they're doing to Russia.
Right.
But, it's sending a message, and all the things that they accuse China of now, they accuse them of threatening the rules-based order, whatever the hell that means, which is the U.S.-led order. That's it's a very antagonistic relationship now. So naturally, China and Russia, their cooperation has grown. Both their trade relationship has grown a lot. Oil purchases, they've been making deals in their own currency for a few years now. Some deals. I mean, again, this is another thing. It's like, are they that stupid in Washington that they didn't see this coming? Because you also look at other countries now too, like Iran. They've been just dragging out these nuclear deal talks to lift sanctions on Iran just for, since Biden came into office. They've just been teetering along, and it's the U.S.'s, they're the ones that have to make the move to revive the deal, and they haven't done it. And you hear, Raisi, the new president, he was elected because of, he's considered a hardliner. He was elected because of how the previous, administration with Rouhani, how the Iran deal was a total failure. So we hear Raisi and the Ayatollah say now often is that, yeah, we'll return to the deal if the U.S. lifts sanctions. But in the long run, we want to sanctions-proof our economy and not be, relying on the West. And if Biden revives the deal, lifts sanctions on Iran, the next president will probably be a Republican. And all the Republicans in Congress are saying, yeah, once there's a Republican president, the Iran deal's gone again and they're under sanctions. So for Iran, they're going to turn to countries like Russia and China for this kind of alternate system. And they're going to be happy to, abide them, all these countries that are facing similar pressure. You have Venezuela, Iran and Venezuela, they trade gas for gold now because it's the only thing that U.S. sanctions can't touch, even though the U.S. does steal straight up steal Iranian gas shipments headed to Venezuela. It happened a few times.
Well, and there's also potential of Iran partnering up with India and Pakistan, even though they are considered American allies. They have been very much in favor of kind of the China line in all of this. And so,
well, India, the U.S. wants India to be a counter to China in the region, and they've been putting pressure on India because they haven't gone along with the sanctions, and they've been buying more Russian oil. But they also just agreed to like increase military ties and stuff. So I still think, that's kind of been going on in the background for a few years now. The military stuff, like the U.S., they signed this deal under Trump to share more intelligence and like satellite data. And then U.S. military officials said, like, the border dispute between India and China, it got violent. Was that 2 years ago, I think?
Yeah, that was going on a couple of years ago. But I don't know. I've been kind of paying attention to what Glenn Beck's saying about this, and he's been mentioning, at least on the oil front. Now, he hadn't talked to the military front. And he's saying that Russia is like courting India, Pakistan, Mexico, and Venezuela. And
Mexico.
Yeah. And so that might be something to look into, because I don't know all the details on that. I just know he said that, and I was like, that's interesting.
Well, the oil front with India, that's definitely happening. They they offered to use an alternative to SWIFT, which is like the messaging system that banks use for global transactions that the U.S. has sanctioned Russia from. Not all Russian banks. They could still, I think there's exemptions for oil deals, but Russia has offered an alternative to that messaging system for India to do like rupees for rubles. And India seems interested, and the U.S. is kind of threatening to sanction them over it. But then again, at the same time, there's this other military stuff going on in the background. And then Pakistan, Imran Khan was just voted out. He says the U.S. was behind it, which, there's definitely a good chance that they were. And his record over the past few years, he's really been speaking out against the U.S. He's pretty aligned with China, and he didn't let the U.S. put a base in Pakistan when they were withdrawing from Afghanistan. I think that pissed them off. The U.S. really wanted a base in that region, but nobody let him. These are all.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
No, what could go wrong?
These are all pretty interesting things to watch. I think, the U.S. is just shooting themselves in the foot. The IMF said recently that the sanctions are hurting the dollar's dominance over the global financial system.
Have you read have you read that book, the Grand Chessboard by Zbigniew Brzezinski?
I haven't. No, that's another thing I got to read.
Yeah, well,
I know Scott's probably read that like 10 times.
Yeah. Well, that's how I found out about it. So.
Yeah. Let him tell me about it.
He pressured me into it. Don't let me pressure you into it. Like, it's not a fun read. I'm gonna tell you that. But when I look at the layout and the way that the geopolitics is operating, I would say that what is laid out in that book was a blueprint for what America has been doing since the 70s.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually, like, for someone in your position, like what you're doing, I think it would be very worthwhile to pick up and read. But don't expect a fun read. It is not a fun read.
Yeah.
It will tell you, you'll be like, why am I reading this shit? Why do I want to know all this? But what he does in this book, which I found interesting, is he lays out region by region what the economic ties are.
Yeah.
So he gets into like Kazakhstan and the oil and natural gas and all this stuff, and talks about Ukraine and Russia and China and all these different dynamics and the economic benefits of of being of spreading American dominance in these regions. But he lays it out and he's like, look, we got a finite window here to do this, is basically what he's saying. And this is why we want to be involved here, and this is why we want to be involved there. And he's laying all that out. And I'm wondering if we haven't missed the window. I'm wondering if that window hasn't passed. He's like, we're only going to be the sole superpower for so long. So we have to do this in a finite amount of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it might have passed. And, you know, I think a lot of it has to do with all the wars in the Middle East over the past 20 years. Really bogged the U.S. down. I mean, Obama was the one who started the pivot to Asia, as they called it, but he didn't really get it going because he decided to start a few more wars, you know, in the Middle East.
Yeah, war's fun.
Yeah.
Ask Malcolm Nance. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's a hoot. So let's talk a little bit about the Sweden and Finland issue before we jump off here, because we're almost at an hour. So it goes by quick every time. So we got a situation where now maybe I read it wrong. Maybe I'm understanding this wrong. It's Finland and Sweden are threatening to join NATO, or NATO is threatening to absorb Finland and Sweden?
They're both, you know, Finland and Sweden, they're talking about joining NATO together, and they're, you know, strongly considering it, it seems like. And there's been reports that say they're going to apply for membership by June. And NATO has said that they would accept them. So it's both, you know, both things are true. They're both, you know, threatening that they're going to join NATO. And Finland has an over 800-mile border with Russia.
Right.
You know, Russia is already warning, if they join, that means, you know, our border with NATO expands by 800 miles, and we have to respond by sending more weapons, you know, nukes and hypersonic missiles in the region. So yeah, I mean, it'll do a lot to increase tensions in the region. And you know, neutrality worked out pretty good for Sweden, I think. So I don't know why now. And Finland
is there a there's a waterway between Sweden and Russia, right? Am I correct about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Finland, there's the Gulf of Finland, which is where St. Petersburg is. Mm-hmm. And that's where they're saying Russia has said that they're going to put a lot more, you know, weapons and stuff, probably, you know, warships and all sorts of stuff. Probably see more NATO. You know, there's been NATO exercises with Finland and in the Arctic and in the Baltics a ton. So it'll just add more to that.
Well, Russia has kind of a dominant position in the Arctic, if I'm not mistaken. They're the ones who are excavating more natural gas than any other country in the Arctic regions, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Yeah.
They have a lot of, you know, land in the Arctic, a lot of territory in the Arctic.
Right. So this is a huge threat to their economy, that cutting off their throughways. It just yeah.
And you know, all the U.S. military, you know, branches, they all have big plans for the Arctic.
Well, that's where the world ends.
Yeah. It's the Northern Front is what NATO calls it. So yeah, there's a lot of things in the works to kind of expand militarily up there. It could be another front with Russia, you know, in the future. So it's pretty scary, all this stuff.
Yeah, it just you see how Russia reacts to Ukraine, and I mean, I didn't even get into 2011, which was something I wanted to ask you about yet. So, if you have a few more minutes, I'll ask you about that here in a minute. But the I just don't see how any of this seems like it's going to have a good result. I don't understand the U.S. sentiment that, oh well, we can just absorb these nations into a NATO alliance and Russia's not going to react in any irrational way whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is going, I mean, I'm very cynical about all this now. I don't see anything good coming out of this. I don't see anything changing for a while. No matter who is the next president, I think we're going to keep going probably in this direction. So there is like a lot of anti-war, intervening in Ukraine sentiment on the right now. So hopefully,
wasn't that part of the arguments with Trump was, I remember there was I think it was DHS. He was a DHS commander or spokesman or whatever, and I might have the acronym wrong personally, but it might have been DIA, but I thought it was DHS. But he was it Vindman, Alexander Vindman?
Vindman, yeah.
And he had actually given testimony at one of Trump's impeachments, saying that we had laid out like this the Russian strategy was already in place. And like what basically, he was basically saying that Trump coming in and changing it was a threat to American national security, if I remember correct.
Yeah, that is basically what the whole impeachment was about, was that Trump, I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous because he was the first one to send them, those Javelin missiles in the first place. Right. And he held up this one shipment for like a few weeks. So he played his part in this whole thing, but he just wasn't going along with it, hard enough, I guess, for Vindman and the rest of the establishment there. But yeah, I mean, things really could have been a lot better under Trump when it comes to Russia. And a big part of it is the whole Russiagate thing. I think that's part of why he was such a Russia hawk. He pulled out of a few arms control treaties. He, like I said, he was the first one to send Ukraine
Did he pull out of the nuclear deal that we had with Russia? I want to say
he pulled out of the INF treaty, which banned short and medium range ballistic missiles.
Maybe that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. And he pulled out of Open Skies, which was like a mutual surveillance treaty that allowed like overflights over each other's territory. It's kind of outdated now with satellites, but it's like a trust building thing. So that was also pretty stupid. But and they almost New START, which is the last nuclear arms control treaty between the U.S. and Russia, that limits the amount of bombers that they can have deployed and nuclear warheads that they can have deployed. I think the Trump administration was ready to let that expire. They're in negotiations with Russia on it, and we're just kind of, I think, just sabotaging them. That's one thing I kind of had some. I was hoping the Russia stuff wouldn't be so bad because when Biden first came into office, he called Putin and they agreed to extend that treaty. But then since then, it's just been horrible. Right away sanctions and calling him a killer and all that. It was a bad start, and it got much, much worse.
Maybe he should have called Hillary Clinton and borrowed her reset button.
Yeah, right. That would be good if we could use that right now. It is amazing how far we've come since then.
You have a few more minutes, man?
I should probably get going. I gotta call my boss.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I gotta get back to work.
Sounds good, man. All right. Well, we'll talk about 2011 and the snow revolution the next time.
Okay.
All right, brother.
But yeah,
well,
thanks.
Plug everything you got to plug real quick.
Go read antiwar.com in the news section, and you can follow me on Twitter at DeCamp Dave, and that's it.
Cool. Sounds good, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Do it again.
Yeah.
If you're gonna play this game of pick and choose, well, it's a game that was made for you to lose. It doesn't really matter how many times, it's the same old worn out stories, same old lines. They're all pointing dirty fingers in hypocrisy, bragging on their feats of mediocrity again. Never really making any kind of change, but they keep on getting re-elected, and I find that strange. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, I said fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. What's it gonna take for you to see that we're living in a rigged democracy? People stand in line for the these that they've been choosing, paying no attention to the rights they keep on losing. But they all gather in the rallies and they chant their names, on goddamn well that it's all gonna be the same. Just 4 more years of war and taxes, 4 more years of them grinding down their axes. And that's why I say fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Yeah, fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them. I never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedoms. Cause we don't even need them, we'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking our freedom. Fuck them, don't feed them, cause we don't even need them, we'll never celebrate the tyrants that are taking